Right, Luke, we're live. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me, Simon. Appreciate it.
So, Luke, something I'm thinking about a lot at the moment is modern men and the stresses, the challenges that modern men are under. What's your take on what successful men are struggling with at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty big and open question, and I think from the gents that I work with and my perspective, it's this kind of weird dichotomy of like often well, at least the guys I speak to, kind of got it all on paper. Right, on paper it looks great. Nice house, 2.4 kids, decent job, materially pretty successful. But if we peel back the lid or peel back the onion a little bit, where they're at within that, there's kind of a misalignment. They're not as happy. They're not content. There's this sort of background feeling of like, it's all great on paper, and there's a big but, and that but is kind of where they're at mentally, physically, usually emotionally. And it's this, but it's like, well, outwardly looking in, I feel like I've got it all, but I don't feel happy and I'm not content. And again, when we look a bit deeper, there's often things like work-life balance is out of whack, probably not taking care of themselves as they like physically. And the net result of that is they don't feel, look, and show up kind of as they want. And so, but then they sort of beat themselves up internally with this sort of like, oh, first world problems, what's it? So it's this kind of slight ickiness of just not really being as happy and as comfortable as they would like to be, feeling like maybe they sort of know what they need to do to address it, but can't really see the wood for the trees to address it. And just being stuck, really, I think is probably a good way to look at it.
I can certainly have empathy for that position. I've certainly been in that position myself. What do you think are the steps? Because there's probably a myriad of different directions to go with that. And if someone reaches out to you, like how would you guide them through that situation? Because you've often got yourself in a situation with wife, family, children, house. So you can get yourself stuck in that. So I'm just interested, what's the way through?
Yeah, I think I guess, one point is it's not one magic thing, right? There's something that I say, which is, there's some product to your daily actions, habits, behaviors, and choices. It's not one big thing. It's all the little things that add up en masse that result in you looking and feeling as you do. Now, I believe we all want to walk around looking and feeling as we want as a byproduct of living your life, not because you're doing something weird, wonderful, strange, fucked up, or esoteric, right? The reason my business is called the 1%, part of it's like, yeah, let's be the top 1%, a bit of ego. Really? It's all those little 1% that add up. So I think taking a step back and recognizing that it isn't one specific thing that's going to fix everything in your life, and actually there's a multitude of factors. That's the first point. Secondly, I think there's just so much we're blind to, or one is blind to, right? Like if I was to play out an example, and I'm answering your question in kind of a roundabout way, but hopefully we'll get there. So let's say someone says to me, I hear it a lot, like, I'm not a morning person. And I always like to have a wry smile internally, go, okay then. So look at your evening, right? And so in that example, right, you could say to someone, so, right, what we're going to do, part of feeling a bit better, you're not exercising much, there's more going on than just exercise, we want to start exercising. So we'll say, right, what I want you to do is a little 5-minute workout as soon as you get out of bed. Can you commit to doing that? And they're like, yeah, of course. And then let's say they're working with someone like me, and so the motivation's high because they've got a coach and they're in a program, they spent some money, and that's it. So they come back. Did you do the workout? No. So level 1, kind of PT accountability, you lazy fucking prick, do it next time. And, maybe they go and do it. But what have we learned in that interaction? Nothing, right? We brute force them doing something that they need to do. But how is that going to be consistent and sustainable so they've got a foundation of how to live long term? It's not, right? So instead, you could say, why? And you go, I was knackered. Call them a prick again. I go, why are you knackered? I was up until midnight. We're getting somewhere. Are you up until midnight? Or when I got in from work, I was really stressed. I was sort of ignoring the kids a bit and playing on my phone. Mrs. was pissed off. Then I felt bad about that. And then because I was stressed, I had half a bottle of wine to unwind. Then I saw some news report on my phone, which really stressed me out. Then because I needed to decompress, need some of my own me time at the end of the day, I stayed up watching Netflix. And then I stupidly checked my phone again and saw this email from my boss, slept like shit. Okay. So are you a lazy prick, or is your evening routine out of whack? Your work-life boundaries, stress management, sleep hygiene, technology use, relationship with alcohol, relationship with food, technology use. Like 1 5-minute workout we've asked someone to do at the top end. They're not a morning person. We ask why twice, and there's a hornet's nest of stuff here underneath that's not serving them. And so to answer your question is like, what do you need to do? Well, like, there's things that we need to do. And this is that, I think, where that dichotomy comes from of like, I know what I need to do. I need to do some exercise, and I need to put my phone down and say, okay, why aren't you doing it? And usually the answer is I'm lazy. Well, the guys I work with, like, C-suite partner doing pretty well for themselves or whatever, you've done well, you've got a wife, kids, and you've done well in business. That doesn't strike me as someone lazy. So why are you lazy here? But if we just say I'm lazy, well, that stops the conversation. We ask why a couple of times and go, well, there's loads of stuff here. And so then you can start to address that, right? And so there isn't one magic thing. There's the things that we need to do that we all kind of know we need to do. The problem is with a lot of the guys I work with, when that doesn't happen, they just revert to, I'm lazy, can't be arsed, whatever. And they say they make excuses. It's an excuse, but it stops them going any further, right? Often the gents I work with, you go, if you had a client and some of your team you're managing and there was 1 week where the sales weren't very good or you were struggling, you won't go, fuck you, sack the client and just stop. You go, well, let's hold up a second. Let's take a step back. What's going on? Let's do some root cause analysis. And it's about doing some of that on your own life. And then once you start to address those little fundamentals, well, then I guess as an emergent property, you starts to feel better about yourself. I guess the thing is that, well, where do I start? Well, I guess that's another conversation to be had. But I think it's looking at your life like that. Now, when you're 20, you don't have the sort of responsibilities we're talking about, wife, kid, business, the rest of it. And so it's kind of easy to just grind it out and get on with it. When we're at the stage that we're at, 40 plus, I think there's so much more going on that we need to address to feed into. And more often than not, I think often guys try and fall back on the modalities that might have worked when they were 20, 30. And that might have worked then, but it's not fit for purpose anymore. And so we think, oh, I can't do it, or I'm too old. It's like, no, you just need a different way to look at life. But it starts from that, well, let's get to the root of what's going on. Does that kind of answer the question?
It's a great answer. And actually, you shared something with me there, which I've never really thought about, which is great, which is the things that I did when I was in my 20s and 30s before marriage and kids is what I've always relied on, right? For a lot of those things, which is you just grind it out. You just find a way to make things work, which is, by the way, which made you successful in the first place.
100%. Yeah.
Which you like, I can remember working through some weekends, working really late on a Friday night, not going out with the friends because I was like, I want to get this proposal out. Or I've worked like a full all day Monday, all day Tuesday because we've got a big thing coming up. So you basically just find a way of grinding it out. And also you have less of the things that create stress at that time, which is responsibilities and children and a partner and all those sorts of things. So it's funny, isn't it? Because we go back to the point of grind it out, because that's almost like our mentality. I'll figure it out. I'll find a way. I'll push through. But then when we have the responsibilities, it requires a different approach. I think maybe that's where people are getting stuck, is they're using an old mindset to fix a new problem.
Totally. And I think it's there's a phrase or a quote, I'm going to butcher a bit, I don't know who said it, but it's, what got you here won't get you there. And so it's recognizing that actually we're now at a different stage and we have to have a different way of operating. Some of the fundamentals of like what you need are still the same, but the methods by which you achieve those and how you apply those and make them practically applicable given the vicissitudes of life, work, kids, the rest of it, that's the bit that has to change. And part of it's a bit like, the book, Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. It's a bit like it's not playing on quite so tightly and actually just relaxing a little bit allows it to breathe and gives a bit of freedom. Like, and often the guys I work with are quite perfectionists because they're quite driven, done quite well for themselves. And so that sort of mindset as well, that, grind it out, can trip them up. And so the analogy I give here, and I wish it was mine, it's not. I got it from a client a few years ago, but I love it. And it's like you're driving down the road and you're like, oh shit, you get a puncture. So you jump out and stab the other 3 tires. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? Just put the knife down. Let's keep going. But it's like metaphorically being able to do that with oneself when you work on yourself. But we don't. It's all gone wrong. It's like, no. What do we need to move forward? And a lot of the time, it's been able to say, well, actually, it's not quite as bad as you think. What have we actually done and achieved? And then what do we need to do to continue to move forward? But I think a lot of guys also, and that's the whole back to your 20s or 30s, the bar they set themselves to do this stuff is really high. Oh, I can't do that. It's impossible. I can't go to the gym 5 days a week if we're talking about exercise. Don't. Could you do 5 push-ups every morning? Yeah, all right, then. Start there. But we don't give ourselves that grace. And that might sound trite, but 5 push-ups every day in terms of exercise is better than 0, never. But then very quickly, if you build that habit, you can sort of start to layer more things into there. But like we said, why is the workout or the exercise not happening in the first place? Well, there's a Pandora's box of stuff we need to address. And so it's kind of trying to thread that needle, in amongst what's going on with life. And I think the second point is being resilient to what life throws at us. Because life's always going to throw shit sandwiches at you, constantly. That's what life is, right? But it's about how we then deal with that as we go. The whole obstacle is the way, stoic way of operating. I think if we want to men to feel empowered to be at our best, I think it's being in that state, because trying to avoid failure and problems is madness, because they're always going to come at you. But it's being able to be resilient and deal with them as best we can. And you can go down the whole like Jocko, David Goggins, and I love all that stuff. But part of it as well, I think you have to have yourself in a good space to be able to deal and cope with these things. And if we're not taking care of ourselves, well, then when life throws something at you, it's just another thing to feel overwhelmed and stressed about. We can't control what happens externally, but we can control this. And I think it's being able to, I believe, if we want to be our best and not feel stuck, it's ultimately empowering ourselves to be able to deal with what comes with life. That's what I say to gents all the time. When I work with guys, I go, "What do you think the next few months is going to be unicorns and rainbows?" Bollocks. Absolute bullshit. It'll go wrong. You'll have times where you think, this is all shit, I can't do it. And that's good. Why is that good? That's all the shit that's keeping you stuck. And that's everything we need to work on. But you also, at some point, need to be in a mindset to be able to at least face that up and do that. Because if you can't do that, that's where you stay stuck. It's like, everything's bad. It's all shit. I can't do anything. But that creates, you basically create a victim out of yourself, and you can't. But then if we flip that on the script, well, what can I do? Might be small. But that way of operating is much more empowered, I believe, than looking at what you can't.
So it's really great. So I love what you shared there, because I can see it now, which is you're being successful at work, you're being successful in the boardroom, like you're owning your shit when you're there, you're doing great, and then the bomb hits. You're not doing so well. The sales target hasn't been hit. We haven't hit our profitability target. This hasn't happened, and then more shit happens on top of more shit. And then you get home, the child's poorly, your wife's unwell, this child has that. And then it's just the big and then the stress bucket has just become huge. And now on top of that, now you might get fired.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Great.
And then now we're going for a financial crisis, and now the mortgage rate's gone higher, and it's and. So when all of these things are happening, like it's almost like you end up having nowhere to go, because it's all coming at you all at once. And I don't think we're not prepared for it. Certainly in our 20s and 30s, nothing prepares you for everything that happens as a family life man. And I think that's why maybe we get this feeling of it's all happening now, it's too much. And like, hang on, but I worked all my life to get to this point. Yeah. What's that when you talk to guys? Are they a little bit surprised that it's kind of all too much? Like, no, surprise isn't the right question. It's just when I got to this point, when it was all a bit like everything's happening all the time and it's a bit much, I was like, yeah, but I'm at the top of my career. That doesn't make sense. Like it's like it doesn't make sense. Is the big thing?
Well, I think part of it is that you work really hard to achieve these things, and we have these external goals, career-wise, whatever else, and family, and part of it's because you're looking externally, you get there, and then it's like, oh, this isn't the dream I was sold, because, and then there's two parts to that. Often, not always, but often, one or someone's had to sacrifice their own physical and mental well-being at the altar of that success. So you get to the top and you go, oh, I'm fucked here. And then you go, well, actually, that number in the bank and that promotion, that title doesn't have the sparkle I was expecting. It's vacuous. And so you go, oh, shit. So not only have I sacrificed my own physical and mental well-being and whatever else at the altar of that, I'm not feeling great because of that. That accolade hasn't really given me the zing. That bonus in the bank, so oh, that's nice. It doesn't have the sparkle I thought. And so you end up feeling a bit like, well, one can feel a bit like, it's like you're searching for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and you just never quite get there, that hedonic treadmill. And it's like, well, so then I think if you've achieved that and you're feeling great about yourself, well, then it's sort of different. But then if you're feeling great about yourself, you're happy internally, and the external bits don't matter. And I think it's when there's that disconnect, it's like, when I've achieved X, I'll be happy. Well, that's a fool's game. And ultimately that's what happens. And I think that's where a lot of it is. It's like, oh, when I've cleared the decks, I'll be a bit happier. And when this happens, and when, it's like, no, you're sacrificing today and now for that external happiness. And I don't know if I quite answered the question, but I think that's ultimately what happens. And then you throw into that busy, overwhelmed kids, whatever else, and I wanted all this, but it's all hectic. But I think it all stems from this thing, part of like, well, if you're not taking care of yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, you then it's very hard to cope with, or even enjoy the success you're having, because you're constantly firefighting and looking elsewhere. Whereas actually, if you've got metaphorically your feet firmly on the ground, forward center of mass, and you're feeling positive about yourself, well then that is a better place for that to happen, both positive and negative. So the good things, great. Shit things happen. That's frustrating. What do we do? And so then you can sort of roll with stuff. But then ultimately, you're aiming for contentment today versus this dream you're trying to achieve some part of the future.
Yeah, because I think that's exactly what it was. It's the dream you're working towards. Because a lot of guys, I certainly feel like this, which was, hang on, I achieved the dream, the wife, the family, the house, the car, the job, the bank balance. I achieved those things. But then why, now I'm here, do I feel stuck within it? Like that, it almost, so I feel like Maslow's hierarchy, which I mentioned a few times, is that I feel like you can get to that point of self-actualization and then go, hang on a minute, I'm at the top of the mountain, I've climbed the mountain, I'm at the wrong fucking mountain here. Like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
what's this about? This I wasn't
Yeah,
sold this dream. This is the dream isn't what I thought it was.
exactly. Exactly. But if you get to the top of that mountain with happy kids, happy wife, balance, present, physically in a good spot, I think that mountain would look very differently. But the point is, externally nothing has changed, right? But internally you have, and that's I think for me that I believe that's the core difference, right? It's like there's nothing wrong with achieving all this stuff. In fact, that's what we want. We don't want to go live in a fucking cave and do nothing. That's not what we want either. But I think if that's coming at the cost of all these other important things, well then for me that's where the rub is. Like, because if you've got money in the bank, great career, massive house, but you're on your phone constantly, you don't know, or you don't see your kids, and you're short and snappy with them, and you know that your relationship is a bit rocky because you're so obsessed and you know, what's the word, consumed by work. You don't see your friends, you haven't got many external things. Like, that doesn't sound like a happy place, right? Or a content place. And so, like, so yes, you might have all the external things you've looked for, and on paper all the boxes are ticked, but you're not feeling great. But because if we peel back the lid and look underneath, it's not in the place that you want it and need it to be, right? And I think that's the rub. I think if we throw into that as well, is this whole thing of like, and I think this is where sometimes that misalignment comes as well. Because I think I mentioned this the other day when we had a brief chat, Simon, was just this like commitments to oneself that aren't kept, right? Which is like that scenario, right? I've achieved it all, but like, okay, well, so today, balls to it, I'm going to get healthy. I'm going to get up and do some exercise. You don't. Right, I'm not going to play on my phone this morning. I'm going to listen to my wife when she talks to me. You ignore her, you straight on your phone answering work emails. When I get to work, I'm going to have that different conversation with a client, and I'm going to have that, give a pip to that team member who's really fucking about. You ignore all that, you don't do it. When I get home, I'm not going to drink because I need to have a clear head. You open a bottle of wine. I'm not going to ignore my kids and play on my phone whilst they're doing bedtime stories. You do. I'm not going to get to bed late. You do. Now, all those little things, one of those things in isolation, no big deal, right? If your day and week is just full of that, no one else sees those commitments that we're talking about. You get 360 HD vision on all of that, right? And so what that does is internally tell yourself repeatedly you're full of shit and you don't do what you say. I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying that is, you know, if that was an external party making commitments to you, you'd be like, this fucking guy's a bit flaky. You know, anything he says, but you're doing it to yourself on repeat. And so again, that's a very rocky foundation to operate from, because internally you're telling yourself you don't practice what you preach or do what you say. Now, I know those little things don't seem like much, but they are your life. Your interactions with your kids, your interactions with yourself, how you talk to your team, what you do every day, that is life. And if that's all a fucking mess, you're not going to feel very good. And so in my experience, it's not one magic panacea, but like a lot of that, if all of those things I just talked about, you flip them on the head, you wake up, give your wife a kiss, and you do a little bit of exercise and you listen to her, you're not on your phone. You do like a nice breakfast with your kids, you actually listen to them. At work, not procrastinate, doing what you need to do, dealing with, you know, tricky problems as you can. Finish your day, put your phone down, actually do a bedtime story and listen to what you're saying. Give your wife some time, don't open a bottle of wine and have a good night's sleep. Like, that as a cascade of behaviours often will feel much better, right? Because that's what you do most days. And so rather than looking externally, oh, well, when I get this, buy this car, or when we have the holiday, it'll be great. It's like, no, none of that's going to fix anything. It's like your life is what you do every day. It's how your wife greets you when you're walking from work. It's how you greet your kids when you're walking from work. And if that's all a mess, I don't think you're going to feel very good. But if we address that, I think we're in a much better place.
So glad we're having this conversation, because I think this will really resonate with a lot of people. So, for example, everything you've just said there, one of the things that I found when I was drinking heavily a number of years ago was that every day I'd wake up and go, I'm not drinking tonight. And then by the time we got to 4 or 5 o'clock, we'd open a bottle of wine. And it was never excessive, but 1 or 2 bottles of wine most nights starts to really add up.
Yeah, I'll
Now,
have an impact.
yeah, but the thing was, and then what I'd noticed over, say, 6 months, 9 months of doing that was that internal dialogue was, I don't trust myself anymore, because I know that I'm going to say one thing at 11 o'clock, and then by 4 o'clock, I'm going to say something different. I completely lost trust. You completely lose trust with yourself when you don't keep your promises to yourself. And I think the difference is now I've done a lot of the work, is that I don't have to make promises to myself because I already know how I'm going to show up the next day. So I really think this piece of work we're talking about is critical for people to go through,
No.
especially in all the stresses and the way things are today. And the thing I'll pass it back to you on is that it's going from what we chased as extrinsic. We chase these extrinsic things, which is the house, the car, the wife, the holidays, all of those kind of things. And now it's almost got to transition to we're focusing on what's intrinsic and how we feel and what's internal within us.
100%.
And I think that's the turning point. That's the turning point. So let me ask you this, which is, where do you start with that journey?
Yeah, again, that's a very good question. And there's, excuse me, I guess there's a multitude of ways you could do it. I think for me, how I like to work is kind of addressing, superficial is the wrong word, but the practical with the sort of the deeper work, right? And I think you need both, because there's definitely, if someone isn't taking care of themselves physically, look internally, you can control the mind with the body, right? Because if you can do all the mindset work you want and all the headspace work and all the journaling, if you're really unfit, overweight, feeling crap, you're unhealthy, it's like pushing the boulder up a hill. You can be all those things and do some of that work, but I think you're not going to maximize it. So I think there's a two-pronged approach, because those habits and behaviors will give you a better headspace and state. Not only that, the very act of getting on top of some basic habits and behaviors helps your mindset, because you start to make commitments to yourself that you show yourself you can keep. And so it builds up that resilience. And so part of this, the way I like to work, is you have to have fucking action. I've had tons of therapy, loads of coaching. You ever work with a coach that hasn't had a therapist or a coach? They're a fraud, in my opinion, because who am I to charge a premium to help people? Am I the finished article? Am I fucked? Right? So just to be crystal clear. And so I'm caveating what I'm about to say about therapy sometimes. So it's fantastic, but sometimes, especially for gents, and I'm making massive generalizations here, by the way, it can be very talk-oriented and discovery-oriented, which is powerful, not a lot of action. Because it's like, we've discovered that, and I think especially for the guys out here, it's like, right, that's great, what the fuck do we do about this then? And so being in that kind of mindset of sort of, let's understand and discover that, pull the thread, unpick, right then, let's get our hands dirty. So I'm going to loop back to the original question, where do you start? For me, it's about setting some basic foundational habits that serve you physically, mentally, and emotionally, whilst also at the same time working on that. So very practically, some of the stuff I do with some of the guys when we first start, it's like, let's get a habit around exercise activity, which you can apply consistently every day. It doesn't matter where you are, how busy you are, no matter what's going on, and build from there incrementally. Likewise, in terms of how they eat, because again, how you eat has an impact on your mood, how you look, how you feel, and the rest of it. And again, it's not like a diet plan, but equally, if that's not where it needs to be, if that's poor habitually, we can address that. But then also what we do up here. So from a mindset perspective, what can we start to do straight away to help you take ownership of yourself, look at your problems and address those things? And it's kind of like taking some core foundational, really what you call like micro habits, and then starting from there, showing yourself that you can definitely fit them in, you can commit to them, you can build them in, and it's achievable, and then slowly and incrementally building from there. And then at the same time, when you've got those kind of more foundational behavior elements going, we start to do a little bit of deeper work and looking at like where you're at, like what are your values, what's core to you, what matters, what's important, where's your North Star and where you're pointing. Because when you're not feeling your best, it's like sometimes you're like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And often the guys I work with have done kind of values work, that sort of stuff, in a work setting. It's like, no, let's point the mirror at yourself. And often when I get guys to do this stuff, they're like, because they don't like what they're going to see, and they sort of know what they're going to see. And sometimes it kind of just tells you what you already know. But when you see that in black and white, it's like, right then, there we go. And so to answer your question, for me, I think there's 2 points. There's behavioral work we need to help us feel and operate better, which also then has an impact on your mindset. And I'm not just talking about exercise and nutrition. There's other practical things like building good work boundaries, technology use, boundaries around how you use social media, work-life balance and structure, and the practical stuff, because there's things that need to change. But then alongside that, let's have a bit of a deeper look at where I'm at and what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And so for me, I think you put both pieces together, but you start really small. And often with the guys and how I work with them, I always say you have to part your ego because that's not lots. No, you're not doing it. So let's start doing it and see what happens. What happens is even after a week, oh, head's a bit clearer, maybe belly dropped a bit, string of commitments to myself I've just kept. What next? That's a fundamentally more empowered place to operate, which is the old operating manual, like we said at the start, which is grind out, go fucking hard, then something will happen, it all falls over and you quit. And it's like, from that point, just incrementally and steadily do the work. And especially that approach when 40 plus, 2 to 3 kids, busy business, like, oh, I ain't got time to go to the gym 7 days a week, and I can't meal prep, and there's no way I can do this because I'm so busy. I'm working till 9 o'clock at night. It's like, okay, that's all true, but does that mean you can't do anything? No. So what can we do within that? And also, invariably, what I find with the gents I work with is that this I don't have time. Like, it's true and it's not. It is, insofar as we have got reduced time. But equally, when we again start to unpick it, let's look at your screen time. Go, hold up a second, that's like 6 hours. Maybe we can get that to 3. All of a sudden we got some more time. One guy I chatted to a while ago, and I'm not going to say his name, but he was like, I've just got this thing where I love it in the morning where I sit on the toilet for 45 minutes. My me time, I was like, yeah, I get you need some me time, but we could probably use some of that time, And what that speaks to is this, and this is a bit of the deeper work, is there's a Carl Jung quote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it'll rule your life and you'll call it fate. And I think there's so much we're all blind to and that we can't see, and it's just helping someone see some of that, but doing something practical in order to address it. That was quite a long-winded answer. Did I answer the question there?
Certainly did. Yeah, of course. I'm loving your answers. I've never heard that Carl Jung quote before. Yeah, I'm just thinking about that for a second. That's a great quote.
It's a really good one because when you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, because there's so much we do that's on autopilot that we don't think about, and some of that's the more practical, like I said, but some of it's the deeper stuff as well. And until we discover it and unpick it, it will rule your life because you don't see it.
Well, I think what a lot of what I think about is that sometimes you're busy, so you just show up without intention. So like you say the autopilot, well, that's just, you're just showing up, you're doing the thing where that's the grind, you're just back into it. And it takes a moment or two to kind of step back and the work with a coach. I don't think you can do this on your own, by the way. So that's why I love talking to yourself and talking to coaches, is that because I think it's so important that people have someone to hold up a mirror and then say, or just equally ask them why. Okay, well, why are you not doing certain basic things which you should be doing? You should be eating in a certain way which will be better for you, but why do you feel you need a treat every lunchtime? Like, you don't have to have it, but why do you feel like you need it? What is it? What's holding you back for that? And I think it's peeling back those sorts of layers is probably really valuable. And then also just uncovering that you've got 45 minutes available in the morning, or trying to understand, like, how do I free up some time so you can do some self-care?
Yeah, exactly. And even just the example you said there about the food, there could be 2 answers, right? And there might be both, it might be one. One of them is, well, actually, I'm really hungry because I'm not eating well elsewhere. So we need to fix the nutritional break very, 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 very practically around what you're doing elsewhere. It might be you've got a learned behavior from your past where you want to do X, Y, and Z because how you were treated as a child, and that it could be both. And so it's about just where the why comes in, is that allows you to start to unpick and address this, because the whole point is, until you do, and this is the whole, until you make the unconscious conscious, it'll rule your life, and you call it fate, because that's just how I am. And so many people, I think, go through life saying that's just how it is, and it's like, and again, the work I've done myself, I wouldn't be talking like this 10 years ago. Like, I'd have been like, all we're talking about, bollocks, like whatever. I was not, in the headspace. And every now and again, I'll have a client that's like late 20s, early 30s, and I'm like, you don't understand how far ahead of the game you are. like I was fucking clueless. But the point I'm making is these conversations. So I'm just like this. I'm an angry person. I'm an anxious person. I'm a X person. Or that's how I do things. Well, again, that just cuts the conversation off. You go, well, why? Why were you like that? And you go, and then once you start to do the whys, you start to get somewhere, and then you can address it.
I think what I love about what you're doing is you're putting a spotlight on a question like, why are you angry? So why are you responding in this way? So if this thing happens at work, why do you respond in a aggressive way, which then you're barking at the people that work for you, then you're going home, you're not being great to your wife and your kids, then you're downing a bottle of wine, why? And then that's happening on a repeated behavior. And what I love about what you're doing is asking, like, well, let's peel back why this is happening. Because did you need to respond like that? And actually, it's realizing your response in that moment has got nothing to do with that moment. It's actually got everything to do with what happened earlier in your life, possibly in childhood. But because you're a proud man, you've never been to therapy because you never thought you needed it.
Exactly. And there's the bit about what's happened in your past. There's also, if you're the person doing the shouting, you said what happens in the evening. Well, if that's happened in the preceding evening when you're doing the shouting, you're going to be slightly hungover, tired, shit, whatever. So very practically, you're not going to feel very good anyway, just generally. So it's both, right? It's like, why am I knocking and shouting at someone because my fuse is shut? Or why? Because I slept like shit and I'm drinking too much. Okay. So there's those bits that need addressing. But then why are you doing all that in the first place? Well, there's a practical. But then also, why do I react in those situations anyway? And that's the deeper work. And so there's levels to all of it. And so you can try and do the deeper work, but if someone's habits and all that other stuff is all over the place, I find it's much harder. It's like you're just trying to swim upstream. If you get someone into a better headspace physically and mentally, they feel better, more open, and they're all more able to have those kind of conversations. And so it's sort of chicken and egg, right? But I think for me, you kind of need both.
I was going to ask you, how willing are men to go back to childhood, to think about the things that had happened, or why they often react in the way that they do? Because for me, I did that piece of work, and I started off with doing the basic. I say basic. I did talking therapies, like you talked about. I did about 12 weeks of it, and I just found like it made me worse because there was no action plan.
Exactly.
Like I was like, and I remember saying to her a few times, which was, when is this supposed to get better for me? And then she would reply, stop trying to control the process. I'm like, no, no, I genuinely want to know when I feel. She'll go, how do you feel? I'm like, terrible. That's why I'm here. I feel awful all the time. So like, when does this get better at any point? And then I'd leave that therapy session and then I go and journal or write stuff down. And I'm like, I'm worse now. I've started sharing. Now we've ended the session. So but the point I'm actually trying to make is actually that therapy is actually really good and really useful, but you've got to get the right type of therapy that's right for you. So I think that I feel like it's an important thing to do, but you just need to find the right way of doing it. And to get into some of the things that happen in childhood.
Yeah.
So I think we're all hanging on to stuff.
Of course. And to answer your question in terms of, I'd say there's levels of receptivity to stuff, right? And some gents who've done nothing, a teeny bit of something can absolutely blow someone's head off in a positive way and really, really help. Other people are more receptive to it. And I've got a client at the moment, we do a bit of shadow work in one of the programs, Carl Jung shadow work. So it's like, and the concept behind that is like those negative parts and aspects to your character that rear up and rear the head. It's like they're all, they're there. And so rather than ignoring them, bringing them to life and giving them color and context, and the sort of the concept behind shadow work and how I sort of do it is like giving it a name and a character and some color. And what I say is like, I call it hero shadow work, is like, in popular culture, what character or hero, negative or positive, would you relate to with that? And because usually there's always like a positive and then there's a negative side to it. And so it's ultimately labeling those negative habits and behaviors. So in the future, when we see them rear their head, you don't have to react, you can recognize them, address them. And not only that, as guys, we don't like talking about ourselves, and we find it difficult. So talking about yourself in the third person, then giving it a character, kind of all make it a bit fun. So it makes it easier to do that. And so anyway, the point I'm getting to is we've done a bit of work with him on that, and he's absolutely loved it. Gone full hook, line, and sinker, asking about different books to get, and it's really helped him unlock all sorts of different stuff, and he's gone into it. Other guys will go, yeah, I found this, it's great. And it'll give them a little bit. And so you've got to meet someone where they're at and what they need. And so I think it's just the way I sort of think and coach is it's helping someone relative to where they're at and what they actually need. Now, a lot of the stuff I do is group stuff. I do one-to-one coaching as well. And in a group environment, you can do the sort of deeper work we're talking about, but it's not always as practical or necessary. But the power of a group is you hear loads of other guys sharing lots of similar problems. And that allows a level of depth because you go, hold up a second, he's struggling with that, and he's struggling with that, and he said that. And so, and then sometimes we'll get to that. But I think it's ultimately, it's kind of, you sort of, as a coach, generally, you can tell someone where they're at and what they need. And I think a lot of the guys I work with have probably never done any real personal development at all. And they're coming into it relatively fresh. Maybe some or two have had the odd coach. And so if you apply the sort of holistic approach I've talked about, which combines all of the three elements I sort of, think about, which is nutrition, exercise, mindset, ownership, and the deeper work we're talking about, I think it gives them a lot to think about and to work on. And then often in some of those avenues, they go, hold up a second, there's stuff going on here, and then we can pull that thread. So for me, it's kind of like opening up the net for someone to see that. Now, I will have some clients where I'll talk to them and it's like very evident that they need some deeper work like we're talking about. And so I'm not a therapist, but I do coach guys along those kind of lines, and then we'll do that. But it's more case by case, if that makes sense. Ultimately, it's powerful stuff. But again, some guys are like, what the fuck is this? But in my experience, actually, once you take someone through a process and they start to see some of it, some guys are like, well, I just need to get a bit fitter and healthy and it'll sort everything out. And that's all they care about. And then they're in this process and I'm talking about some of this kind of things, like, what's that about? And then a few weeks in, they go, well, hold up a second, I feel a bit clearer. And actually, that really helps. And I've seen this guy share about his values and what he's doing. And actually, I recognize that's like me. And you do that. And they go, I can see that. Others come at it from the absolute opposite. They're like, I just need to sort this out and I don't care about where I'm at physically. And then you help them get a bit better physically. Oh, I feel a bit better as a byproduct of getting physically better. Now I can do that work as well. So again, I don't know if I've sufficiently answered the question there, but that's kind of how I think about it.
Love that. Love that. There's a couple of bits I want to talk to you about here. So I'm going to take a step back because you mentioned shadow work and I'm really interested in the psychology behind it. So can you share just a bit kind of what is shadow work? Why you would take someone on that journey? Like what's it about?
I mean, there's probably lots of other psychologists and stuff that, and by the way, I'm no expert in shadow work, just to be completely transparent. Where I take it from is Carl Jung's work, right? And he talks about we've all got an ego and a shadow. There's a positive side to it and there's a dark side to it, and that's yourself, what he would call your ego, which is there's like the positive traits in yourself that you where you're. I kind of call it like person version 2, right? So like the best version of you in your state when you're happy, content, you're not reacting, you're feeling your best, right? And that's kind of the light side. The shadow is the parts of yourself that do you down, that negative internal voice where you shout at yourself, where you come out of a conversation or interaction, you go, I didn't really shout myself in glory there. You look back and go, I wasn't great. Those kind of behaviors, the not making commitments to yourself that you don't keep, the internal voice when you don't do those and you beat yourself up. I would categorize and call that your shadow. Someone else might be slightly different, but it's the negative parts of ourselves that we don't like, but also I also attribute it to that voice, the negative voice, which is self-critical, does you down. The sort of voice when you talk to yourself, you would never talk to another human like that ever. That's I would classify as your shadow. And so the idea behind shadow work is rather than hiding from that, is bringing it to life and being really, shining a light on it. There's another Carl Jung quote, hold your shadow out in front, it can only take you down from behind. And the whole concept is being clear on that and what it looks like and what it means. And so if we just rather go, well, that is how I operate sometimes, that's how I behave. Well, once we do that, let's give it a label and make it clear and easy to understand. And so, for example, mine, there's a couple, right? I don't drink anymore for reasons probably not for this podcast, but maybe on a different one. Basically, after 25 years, show myself repeatedly that I can't have a healthy balance around alcohol. So 18 months ago, I made a decision to stop. When I was drinking, one of my shadows would be Oliver Reed. Ollie Reed, the old actor. Like, you don't want to see me when Ollie Reed's out. It's not fun. Like, it's sort of sometimes fun and charismatic until it's not, and then it's not very fun anymore. The other one for me is, I don't know if you've seen. I'm just giving this as an example to help highlight it. House of Cards on Netflix. Frank, the Francis, Kevin Spacey's character. Now, Kevin Spacey's potentially questionable individual anyway. Not him, but his character Frank. And it's that sort of, and that's if I'm going to do a number on myself in turn, it's negative, it's serious. Sort of so is a good idea. That's where it's sort of good, but the ends are never really that good. And actually, the ends are probably going to throw someone under the bus. And in this case, it's myself. Like, so if I hear that sort of voice and those things happening, I can go, whoa, it's a little red flag for me to use that as an indication. And other gents have all sorts. The example I often give is my client, Steve. Did some shadow work with him a while ago, and explaining it like I was explaining it to you, and he went straight away, Jack Bauer, 24. And I was like, okay, that sounds pretty grandiose, right? You're like, Jack Bauer, he's off saving the world, killing terrorists, he's a superhero. But yeah, at what cost? And actually look at his life. Like, his missus is dead, he's an alcoholic, the world's on fire, his kids hate him, everything's completely fucked. So he's got the job done at what cost? And for Steve, who works a partner at a professional services firm, it was just so apt, because he's like, and when he spoke to me, he was probably 3 stone heavy. They need to be 10. He won't mind me saying this, and you don't know his surname, so it doesn't matter. But verging on a heart attack, relationship not in a good way, unhappy, stressed, angry, the whole lot. So yeah, he's achieved lots of great stuff, but at what cost? And actually sacrificing everything at the altar of that. And so for him, straight away, the Jack Bauer sort of the shadow part was like, in an interaction in a meeting, he was like, was that me or was that Jack? And I'm ripping out grenades and metaphorically throwing them into the meeting room. And so for him, really quickly, he had this really simple, easy, beautiful heuristic, which allowed him just to stop, either in the moment qualify or look back and go, no, not so much. But then in looking back, we can then moderate and change and adapt our behavior, right?
Yeah, and I think, yeah, I love that, because I think the shadow work, the reason I asked you about it is because I started touching on some shadow work. And I find it really revealing, because when you think about shadow work, my shadow was really prevalent when using alcohol.
Yeah.
So like
Nice.
I also don't drink anymore either. And I remember the last time when I was really kind of with my shadow, if you were, like I was my shadow, and it was a horrible, aggressive person, which I was like, that is not me. That is not me at all. I really, really like that. And that was kind of one of the last times I really had a proper drink. And I just was like, that I can recognize what that shadow is. And I just don't want to be anywhere near that person. That's not me. And I think doing that work is really important to recognize, oh, okay, hang on, there's 2 different personalities here. There's this dark side and then this light side. And it's almost trying to find a way of, and actually I feel like that side's probably got a whole bunch of good personality traits. I don't
Yeah,
know,
of course.
but it's like, but they're not conducive to my modern day life.
Yeah, and that's why I like to think of it as like the hero shadow. And often I'll at first say, well, what heroes in popular culture? Because they've usually got a great side and there's a dark side to them. And so it's quite easy to see polarized those patterns of behavior or those types of behavior. But like what you said there, I think actually just being able to see and identify it becomes incredibly powerful. And we've all got one. Like, there's no one without a dark side. Everyone's got the shadow. And so trying to pretend otherwise is mad. But so again, the empowered place is, okay, well, if I know I act and behave like that, well, let's just get a bit clear on that and why and where it comes from, and just see it. And then you can start to see that there's little red flags or canaries in the mind well off you being full on shadow mode, Ollie Reed mode, in my case, whatever you want to, whoever it would be, Jack Bauer mode. But you can start to see, well, what are the little triggers to end up on that? And often some of those are the more basic fundamental habits and behaviors where we take care of ourselves. So if we're not doing that, and then we're not doing the work, and then actually the shadow can rear its head. But if we are, and we're privy to and conscious of what can cause that, well, then it empowers you a bit. Are we always out of our shadow? No, no one is. Like none of us are fallible. None of us are perfect. We get things wrong constantly. For me, it's about being able to stop, look, and go, well, okay, that wasn't perfect. What can we do better next time? And try and operate in that space of like ultimately sort of failure and learning. And that's something I bang on about with the clients I work with a lot. Like, life's never going to be unicorns and rainbows, and it's about what we do with it and how we learn from it. And it's easy to say when you're feeling good, when life's kicking you in the face, the obstacle is the way. It doesn't feel like that, but ultimately that is always the case. And I think shadow work, looking at what's not working, interrogating yourself when things have gone wrong. I use inverted commas. I think that's the place we want to be.
I think
when you're operating at your best.
I think I'm going to pick up on something there, because it's an important point, which is about failure and learning. Because I think about this a lot, which is, it starts with pain. You recognize you have pain, and then it moves into struggle because you want to fix what that pain is. Then it moves into some level of failure, which leads into some level of feedback, which ultimately feeds into growth. It's kind of just something I've I've thought about a lot recently, which is there's kind of like a link between them all. And then when you hit growth, then you have a new struggle and a new pain. And it kind of just go this reciprocal link that you keep going through. So I think it's almost about being good with failure, because you're going to fail no matter what. On this wellness journey, this self-care journey, you're going to keep failing until you start getting it right and it kind of works for you. Because if you say go and eat these foods or do this training plan, you're always going to make a mistake somewhere. You're always going to F up all the time. There's no two ways about it, is there?
Yeah, no, exactly. And so what you're describing there, it sounds like it's like the hero's journey, right? You know, well, it goes wrong, you learn, you adapt, you grow, and you just on loop. And that's, I think, ultimately a lot of personal development is. It's like, how do you achieve your goals? Don't stop. Well, how do you do that? You have to learn, embrace failure. So I'm just reading The Gap and the Gain at the moment, and it's a really powerful one. It speaks to a lot of what we're talking about here. And there's a bit of a quote in it which I loved, and I've taken it, and I literally just the last couple of days been like putting some thinking about it, adapting it, and it speaks to what it says. I'll just read it out. And so, just to be clear, I've taken a bit of that and then put my own thinking around it, and it speaks to what's in it. So it's like, the man who fails the most but never stops will always win. He learns, adapts, and grows beyond those who run from failure. Without failure, there is no growth. Without failure, there is no success. The weak man avoids failure. The strong man embraces it. And I think that's the point. It's like, we have to, you're never not going to fail. And in fact, actually, it's the catalyst for growth, success, and everything else. Because when things are going well, you're not failing. Things are just ticking over. It's all good. If something goes wrong, that's the opportunity to learn, grow, and adapt. And the term going wrong could be anything, you know. But sometimes it's really hard to be like that. And then the sort of slightly trite thing is, we can sit here when we're feeling good, and I'm feeling pretty good today. I'm feeling pretty good as well.
Happy, yeah.
And all the obstacles the way. That's all great. When you're stressed, overwhelmed, fucked, and then something else happens, it can be like, wow, it can be really, really hard. And so it's difficult, right? It's not to say that it's not easy. And I say to this to gents all the time, like, sometimes in the programs and how I coach, to be like, yeah, I'm feeling really, X, Y, Z's happening, and I'm shit, and it's stressful, and they're feeling like really in it. And I'll go, okay, that's true. But like, if we just take a step back and look at how you would have been dealing with this 3 months ago, 6 months ago, oh my God, it's a paradigm shift. And I was like, yeah. So I said, it doesn't stop it being stressful, but the level at which you're operating is so different from what it would have been historically. And it's just remembering that hard things are still hard, stressful situations are still stressful, scary, sad things are still scary and sad. But if we can deal with them better, like, well then, or if we're better placed and in a better space to deal with it, that's the best that we can do. And always remembering that, so let's try this too shall pass, but at the end of it, all those difficult shit times in your life, not that it happened, it all happens for a reason. I don't mean it like that, but like, you look back, every single one is a catalyst for growth. Every single one, something will happen off the back of that. And that's not me being trite. It's just, it is a fact. And if you always join those dots backwards, and they're always followed by growth and learning. And sometimes some of the hardest, most difficult things in your life that have ever happened, you would never wish them on yourself or anyone in a million years. Having said that, they're often the things that catalyze us being our best and why we're good at what we do, and they often transmute into something else. The problem is, when you're in it, you can't always see that. And that for me, that's the difficult bit.
Well, the context I'll give to that, because it's absolutely true what you just said, is that the most difficult time in my life was about 4 or 5 years ago, when I went through depression for 2 or 3 years. And it's through going through that period, analyzing why that happened, because I always knew the only answer was through, but I just didn't know, like, what is this? Like, why do I feel like this? I should be feeling great because I've got a wife and a new son and a great job and all these things. But actually, it's all these paper cuts on top. But the interesting thing about that was that was a terrible time. It was horrible for me, horrible for my family. But now it's given me context. And the context is, I can have conversations with people like yourself and have this podcast because of that experience. And the book that I wrote is because of that experience. So sometimes the challenge that you're going through becomes your biggest growth. And actually, I'll never have to go through that again in that way, because I have tools, the self-care tools, all those sorts of things. So what we're talking about here is actually making yourself resilient for the future, so you can grow more, you can learn more, you can take on more, you can take on the next big challenges. So it's it's all there for a reason. And it is there for a reason in some respects, but it's about, I think it's a part of growth and learning.
Yeah, and just and on what you said there, that's ultimately that's why I'm coaching, right? So I've now got 3 kids, happily married, but my business, the 1%, what I do, that catalyzed from an event like you're describing. I think most coaches, there's always been some kind of sort of life event or something that sort of like spurred them to make a change. So would be 9 years ago now, 2015, working at a large ad agency or like a media agency, sort of project director, doing pretty well financially. Stressed. Client was a see you next Tuesday, as I saw them anyway. Wasn't very happy there. Wife pregnant with our first son, Nino. And at the 20-week scan, found out that he was going to be born with a really serious heart condition called transposition of the great arteries, which means without open heart surgery to correct it, you die. It's 100% life limiting. They've only been able to correct it in the last 15 years. And what that is ultimately your pulmonary artery and your aorta are switched the wrong way around. So your blood can't oxygenate, and so you can't breathe, and so ultimately you die without correction pretty much immediately. So it's pretty much a visceral fucking hell slap around the face. And I was like, stressed. I've always taken care of myself physically. I was training a bit, but I was, burnt out, stressed, not happy. Usual, that sort of typical story. And found out about this at the 20-week scan. I said to Kate, I was like, I'm not happy. I'm just going to quit my job, retrain to be a PT. She was like, go on then. I was like, fine. Very supportive. So that was the November 2015. I did. Nina was born in February 2016. And I had the open heart surgery. Before he was born, they told us there's some complications that they weren't sure about, so they weren't sure what to do. Not the sort of things you want to hear. When he was first born, he had a procedure called a balloon septostomy to sort of like, which sounds weird, but to tear his heart open so he could live a little bit longer for like 8 weeks before they did the main operation. Had the main operation, 11 hours open heart surgery. Then when they do it, they leave the chest open so you actually see his heart, which is crazy. Luckily, went amazingly. They were like, we can't believe how well it's gone. Like, it's sort of like a plumbing job that went well. And so he's now a little 9-year-old. He's 9 in a week. Got a massive fuck off scar, but like he's healthy and fit and all really good. So that's the amazing story. The point I'm getting to is that was the catalyst. The obstacle is the way for me going, fuck this, I don't want to do it anymore. And so way back then, I used to do a lot of Olympic weightlifting. So I was in a private Olympic weightlifting gym. I was just like, right, I'll retrain to be a PT. Built up a little pretty decent in-person PT business. I very quickly realised with the people I was working with that they want a bit more than just throwing weights around. And so I did a nutrition qualification and very quickly realised actually it's more than that. It's more about, so I'm pointing in my head here, what you think, how you operate, why you're not happy. And so over time evolved what I do, how I work on myself. Go through that journey, doing a load of work on myself because I wasn't as happy and as content as I want to be. And that's kind of evolved and iterated into what is my business now, which is working with the guys that I work with. And, you call it performance coaching, life coaching for guys. But that would not have happened, or maybe it would have, I don't know. You can never split test life, right? But the event that caused that was me finding out my son might die. And actually, which is a really shit thing, but equally off the back of that, it catalysed me to make a change. Luckily, it's all gone very, very well. Would I ever want that to my family? I said, no, of course I wouldn't. But had that not happened, I wouldn't have done the work, I wouldn't have made the change, and I probably wouldn't be where I am now. I'd be in a different place. And so I think that's just like you were saying, a very similar example of where, ultimately, the core foundation, the spiritual foundation of my business is the obstacle is the way. It's you learn through failure, and how I coach. I just think it's fundamental to everything, and that's kind of how my business and what I do was born. And I'm just really passionate about it because if you embrace life like that, you can't really lose. So it can be really hard sometimes and really challenging, and shit things happen. But if you're able to sort of alchemize the shit things into a learning, well then you can't fail. No matter what happens, and really shit things can happen. I'm under no illusions,
You have been through so much. I don't know how I would handle going through that, knowing that potentially to lose a son, that's immense. And also at that time, you to then make a really brave courageous career decision, which is I want to go in this completely different direction. How did you get to making that decision?
To be honest, it was relatively quick. The place I'd been at before, the business sort of folded through no fault of like anyone specific. It went under. And so I did a bit of consulting, and then I was like, right, I need to get a job, like a salary job. One of those ones where I was like, I'm not quite sure about this. I've been told the client's a bit horrible. I was like, I'll be all right. And then went, and it was just really stressful. And I was thinking, I don't want to be here anyway. it might sound weird. It was almost like a good excuse. Like it might sound crazy. I was like, well, that's happened, and that's the only thing that matters. Well, fuck feeling like this, and it kind of it almost made the decision quite easy. And my logic is always, well, what's the worst case? Go back and do a job like that you don't like. So and my thought process was I don't want to be this stressed out, unhappy dad. Now I obviously went incredibly nuclear in my decision. I was like, fuck that, I quit and do something completely different. But that was my thought process. I can't be this how I am, and I'm passionate about, like, when I'm at my best, I'm optimistic, not saccharine. I look for like what the obstacle is away. If there's a problem, it's glass half full, not half empty. And I don't mean that to say aren't I fantastic. Like when I'm at my best, that's how I'm thinking. And I was the opposite of all of that at the place I was at and where I was. And I was like, I don't want to be this, especially what we've got coming up. We don't know if my son's going to die. It's a really scary, like the odds aren't great, all that sort of stuff. I was like, well, I don't want to be that. And so this career change is kind of a pivot away from that. And so, to be honest, there wasn't like a huge amount of like, where's it going to go? What's the best way to do it? I was just like, I'm going to do this. I've had enough. I'm not happy. We've got this big scary thing happening, and I want to be the person I want to be for that. And that was kind of my thought process. These days with 3 kids and whatever else, if I wasn't happy now, it'd be a very different conversation because I've got to support a whole family and I've got my own business and all the rest of it. But at that time, it was right and we were okay. My wife was incredibly supportive as well, so I just did, and it was the right decision, right? But every decision is the right decision as long as you learn from it. I think that's sort of the point, right?
Yeah, I love that. Wow, you've been on a full-on journey yourself, and then
Yeah.
still adding more to the family as well.
Well, that's it. Well, we're done now, though. I think we said, Cleo very much wanted and loved, but like I think we randomly always used to say we want 4 kids, and then we've had 3, and we're like we love them all dearly, but no more. So that's it. We're not adding to the clan anymore.
Excellent. Luke, listen, I've absolutely loved talking to you today. So thank you so much for your time.
Likewise.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for opening up about your story and the journey that you've been on. But I love the type of coaching that you're doing because I think it's so relevant right now to a lot of successful men that I know who feel stuck within, being successful business leaders, and then they have a growing family, high mortgages, the house, the car, etc. And I think for them to find a way out of that, but it's not a way out, it's a way through that, which actually it's got nothing external. It's all internal, it's all intrinsic. And I think that's the biggest change. And I think I love the message you're spreading, because the more people understand it, the more everyone's lives improve, right? Because a lot of these people are senior business leaders, therefore their impact and is significant to all of their employees, their family at home, all the community. So yeah, I love the piece of work you're doing.
Well, thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed our conversation. It's really fun, and hopefully, as you've gathered, I'm really passionate about all this stuff, and I love what I do. So it's great to chat about it. I could talk for longer. So thank you.
If someone wants to get more in contact with you in terms of the 1%, so I know you have your new podcast, you can talk about that, and also like where can people contact you and be engaged?
Yeah, so I've just released a podcast, which is me talking to clients, ex-clients about all the stuff that we've talked about, and then some talking head stuff for me, just talking about my thoughts of how I coach and how I operate. You can get that on all the major podcast things. So it's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You just search the 1% and you'll find it. In terms of me, the business is my website, which is just the1-percent.com. I'm very active on social media as well. So if you search my name on LinkedIn, Luke Doran, you'll find me under the 1% there. And on Instagram, it's the 1% as well. So if anyone's interested in having a chat, how I can help, you just drop me a DM or a message and we can take them there.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much for your time, Luke. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Been a pleasure. Cheers. Thank you.